The smell of old grease and ambition is a very specific scent, and usually, I find it comforting. It smells like home. It smells like my life's work. But at 4 o'clock in the morning, standing over a stainless steel prep table in the kitchen of the root, it just smelled like a reason to die. I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles turning the color of the parsnips I'd been peeling, and waited for the wave of nausea to pass. It didn't pass. It sat there, heavy and smug, right behind my ribs. This was not part of the business plan. I am Julian, the owner, head chef, and primary dishwasher of the best seasonal vegetable restaurant on this godforsaken block, and I do not have time for morning sickness. I especially do not have time for it when the sun is about to come up and I have 40 pounds of heirloom carrots to roast before the lunch rush. My restaurant is small. It is quiet. It is built on the idea that if you treat a radish with enough respect, it will tell you a story. Across the street, there is a different kind of story being told. Embers. That is what he named it. Silas, a man who looks like he was sculpted out of granite and then polished with expensive bourbon, opened Embers 11 days after I opened the root. While I was focused on the delicate nuances of fermented honey and wild rams, he was installing a 3-ton wood-fired grill and a dry-aging room that probably cost more than my entire lease. He is an alpha in the way a thunderstorm is an alpha. He doesn't ask for space, he just occupies it until everything else feels small. For 3 years, we have been at war. It is a polite war, a professional war, but it is a war nonetheless. He puts out a chalkboard advertising a 40-ounce porterhouse, and I respond by putting out a tasting menu of forgotten tubers that makes the local food critics weep. We don't speak. We just watch each other through our respective front windows like two snipers who have run out of ammunition but refuse to leave their posts. And now, I am standing in my kitchen, vibrating with exhaustion and the terrifying knowledge that there is a tiny, microscopic human growing inside me, and I am broke. I am so broke that I am currently calculating if I can skip my own lunch to afford the organic butter for the dinner service. I pulled my phone out of my flour-dusted apron pocket. My hands were shaking. I needed to tell someone. I needed to tell my sister, Sarah, because if I didn't say it out loud to another human being, I was going to spontaneously combust. I opened my messages, clicked the most recent contact I'd been arguing with, someone I'd labeled as truffle thief in my phone because of a disputed shipment of black winter truffles, and hit the camera icon. I attached the photo of the ultrasound I'd had taken at the free clinic 2 days ago. It looked like a grainy grey lima bean. To me, it looked like the end of the world. I typed it happened. I'm pregnant. I don't know what to do, Sarah. I'm scared. I hit send. Then I put the phone face down on the prep table and buried my face in my hands. I stayed like that for a long time, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a garbage truck. My phone buzzed. Once. Twice. 3 times. I picked it up, expecting Sarah's frantic typing. The screen did not show Sarah's name. It showed a contact I hadn't looked at in months, not since the truffle incident. Embers, do not call. My heart didn't just drop, it performed a complicated gymnastics routine and then died in the dirt. I stared at the screen. Silas had sent 3 messages. The first was, this is not Sarah. The second was, whose child is this? The third was simply, stay where you are. I felt the air leave the room. I felt the scent of my own fear, sour, like milk turned in the sun, fill the tiny kitchen. I scrambled to type a response. I'm so sorry, wrong number, please ignore that, it was a joke, I'm deleting this, please don't reply, I've blocked you. I blocked him. I actually did it. I hit the button and felt a momentary, delusional sense of relief. It's fine, I told myself, leaning against the cold metal of the kitchen cooler. He's a busy man. He's a billionaire chef with a marble empire. He doesn't care about a grainy photo of a lima bean sent by the guy who runs the vegetable place across the street. He'll probably just laugh and tell his sous chef about the crazy omega across the way. I went back to my carrots. I tried to peel them, but my hands wouldn't stop twitching. 5 minutes passed. 10. I started to think I was safe. Then, the front door of the root rattled. We weren't open. The sign clearly said closed. But the person on the other side didn't care about signs. The lock groaned under a pressure it wasn't built for, and then the bell above the door let out a frantic, dying chime. Silas walked into my dining room. He was wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my car, and he smelled like cedar, dark coffee, and the ozone that hits right before a massive storm. He didn't look like a man who had just received a wrong number text. He looked like a man who had just found a breach in his perimeter and was moving in to seal it. He didn't stop in the dining room. He walked straight into the kitchen, his presence so massive that the copper pots hanging from the ceiling seemed to lean toward him. He stopped 3 feet away from me. I was holding a peeler. It was a very small, very pathetic weapon. "Julian," he said. His voice was a low, resonant vibration that I felt in the soles of my feet. He didn't call me by my last name. He'd never used my first name before. I blocked you," I managed to say. My voice sounded thin, like a reed. "You can't be in here. We're closed." "You sent me a photo of an ultrasound," he said, ignoring my protest entirely. He stepped closer. The scent of him was overwhelming now, warm, spicy, and terrifyingly alpha. It wasn't the aggressive scent of a man looking for a fight, it was something deeper, something heavy and possessive that made my inner Omega want to curl into a ball and hide. "It was a mistake," I said, backing up until my hips hit the prep table. "A stupid, late-night, exhausted mistake. I meant to text my sister. I have your number saved for the supplier disputes. Please, Silas. Just go back across the street. Forget you saw it." He didn't move. He just looked at me, his eyes dark and unreadable, scanning my face, my neck, and finally settling on my stomach. I felt a flush of heat crawl up my throat. I was wearing an oversized hoodie and a stained apron, and I knew I looked like a mess. I hadn't slept in 3 days. I had flour in my hair. "Whose is it?" he asked. The question was quiet, but it had the weight of a command. "It's mine," I snapped, my fear finally sparking into a tiny, flickering flame of anger. "It's mine and it has nothing to do with you. We are rivals. We compete for the same 3-star reviews and the same Saturday night reservations. That's all we are." He took another step. I was trapped between him and the table. He reached out, and for a second, I thought he was going to touch me, but he just grabbed the edge of the table on either side of my hips, effectively boxing me in. His scent was everywhere now, cedar and burnt sugar and something like old leather. It was a beautiful smell. I hated it. "You are an Omega, Julian," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "You are a single Omega running a failing restaurant in a neighborhood that is getting more expensive by the hour. You are pale, you are shaking, and you are currently carrying a life that you clearly cannot afford to protect. I am not leaving." I bristled. "My restaurant is not failing. We're just in a transition period." He let out a short, dry laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "You haven't paid your produce bill in 2 months. I know your supplier. Henderson. He's a gossip. He told me you've been asking for extensions." I felt the blood drain from my face. Of course he knew. Of course he was keeping tabs on me. It was a war, wasn't it? He was just waiting for me to starve out. "You're a vulture," I whispered. "You're just here to watch me go under so you can buy the lease and turn this place into a cocktail lounge." He leaned down, his face inches from mine. I could see the faint stubble on his jaw, the precise line of his mouth. "If I wanted this lease, I would have bought it years ago," he said. "I'm here because that child is an Omega's child, and you are alone. And I have decided that you are no longer going to be alone." It was the most terrifying thing anyone had ever said to me. It wasn't a proposal. It wasn't an offer of help. It was a takeover. He stayed for the rest of the morning. He didn't ask, he just stayed. He called his own restaurant and told his sous chef he wouldn't be in for the lunch service. Then, he took the peeler out of my hand, set it on the table, and told me to sit down. I was too stunned to argue. I sat on a milk crate and watched as the most powerful alpha in the city's culinary scene began to peel heirloom carrots with a precision that was honestly insulting. He didn't speak. He just worked. The silence was heavy, filled with the sound of the blade against the vegetables and the rhythmic thud of the carrots hitting the bowl. Every few minutes, he would glance at me, his nostrils flaring slightly as he scented the air. I tried to keep my scent neutral, but I was a mess of anxiety and a strange, burgeoning warmth that I didn't want to acknowledge. 2 hours later, a black town car pulled up to the front of the route. A man in a suit I'd never seen before came inside, handed Silas a set of keys, and left without a word. Silas turned to me, wiping his hands on a clean towel. "Get your things," he said. "Excuse me." I stood up, my legs feeling like jelly. "I'm not going anywhere. I have a lunch service in 3 hours." "No, you don't," Silas said. "I've already called the staff. I told them the restaurant is closed for repairs." "You can't do that," I shouted, my voice cracking. "I'm the boss." "You told them you were working for me." "No," he said calmly. "I told them I bought your debt. Which I did, 20 minutes ago. I paid Henderson. I paid your landlord. I paid your utility arrears. You don't owe anyone anything, Julian. Except me." I felt like the floor had turned into water. I reached out and grabbed the back of a chair to steady myself. You bought my debt." "Why? Why would you do that?" "Because I wanted you to stop shaking," he said. "And because you're coming with me. My penthouse is 3 blocks from here. It has a medical suite, a full kitchen, and security. You will stay there until the child is born." I started to laugh. It was a high, hysterical sound. "You're insane. You're actually a crazy person. I'm not moving into your marble fortress. We aren't even friends. We've spent 3 years trying to ruin each other's reputations." "We haven't spent a single day trying to ruin each other," he said, stepping toward me again. "We've spent 3 years pushing each other. You made me a better chef, Julian. Your tenacity, your obsession with the purity of a single ingredient, it forced me to stop being lazy. I owe you for that. And I'm paying you back by ensuring you don't lose this baby because you were too proud to ask for a glass of water." He didn't give me a choice. He didn't even give me time to pack a bag. He just guided me out of the restaurant, locked the door, and put me in the back of the town car. I felt like I was being kidnapped in the most expensive way possible. The penthouse was exactly what I expected, all glass, cold stone, and a view of the city that made everything look like a toy set. It smelled like him, that deep, grounding cedar and ozone. It was beautiful, and I hated it with every fiber of my being. I spent the first 3 days in a guest room that was larger than my entire apartment. I refused to come out. I refused to eat the food his private chef prepared. I sat on the edge of the bed and calculated how many carrots I would have to sell to pay him back for my debt. The number was in the millions. On the 4th day, I was so hungry I thought I might actually faint. I crept out of the room at 2 o'clock in the morning, heading for the kitchen. I expected it to be empty. It wasn't. Silas was there, wearing nothing but a pair of dark sweatpants. He was standing at the massive marble island, a single light shining over him. He was cooking. He wasn't making something grand or expensive. He was making a simple grilled cheese sandwich. He didn't look up when I entered. "Sit down, Julian," he said. "I'm not hungry," I lied, my stomach immediately betraying me with a loud, echoing growl. He didn't argue. He just slid a plate across the marble. It was the best grilled cheese I had ever seen. The bread was perfectly golden, the cheese was oozing out the sides, and there was a small bowl of tomato soup next to it that smelled like summer. I sat. I ate. I didn't say thank you. He watched me eat, his arms crossed over his chest. His muscles were lean and hard, and the light caught the edge of a scar on his shoulder. "You need to see a doctor," he said. "I've already seen one," I muttered between bites. "I went to the clinic." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're malnourished and your scent is spiked with cortisol. I've scheduled an appointment with a specialist for tomorrow morning. 10 o'clock. I looked up at him, my anger flaring again. "You can't just schedule my life, Silas. I am a person. I am a business owner. You are a guest in my home," he said, his voice dropping into that dangerous, low register again. "And you are carrying a child. Until that child is safe, your life is my concern. Deal with it." The doctor's appointment was the first time I saw the shift. We were in a private clinic, the kind of place that has infused water in the waiting room and smells like expensive linen. I was lying on the table, cold gel on my stomach, while the technician moved the wand around. Silas was standing in the corner, his face a mask of professional indifference. Then, the sound started. the heartbeat. It was fast, thump thump, thump thump, thump thump, like a tiny bird trapped in a box. I felt my throat tighten. I looked away, trying to focus on a spot on the ceiling, but I could feel the tears prickling at the corners of my eyes. I looked at Silas. He hadn't moved, but his expression had shattered. The cold, granite alpha was gone. In his place was a man who looked like he had just seen something he didn't believe in. His eyes were wide, fixed on the screen, and his scent, it changed. The cedar and ozone didn't go away, but they were joined by something soft and sweet, like the smell of rain on a dusty road. It was a scent of pure, unadulterated wonder. He stayed like that for the entire appointment. He didn't say a word, but when we got back into the car, he didn't sit on the other side of the seat. He sat right next to me. He didn't touch me, but I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "It's a boy," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "The doctor said it looks like a boy." I nodded, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. "Yeah. A boy." We sat in silence for the rest of the drive. When we got back to the penthouse, I didn't go to the guest room. I went to the kitchen and started looking through the pantry. I needed to do something with my hands. I found a bag of flour, some yeast, and a jar of honey. I started making bread. It was the only thing that made sense. Silas came in an hour later. He didn't say anything, he just watched me knead the dough. I felt his presence like a physical weight, but for the first time, it didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a tether. The next few weeks were a strange, blurred domesticity. I was still a prisoner, technically, but the cage was getting softer. I started to notice things. I noticed that Silas always left the light on in the hallway because he knew I got up 3 times a night to pee. I noticed that he'd replaced all the coffee in the house with high-end decaf and herbal teas. I noticed that he never mentioned the restaurant, but I found a folder on his desk with plans for a new ventilation system for the root. One night, the nesting instinct hit me like a freight train. It was 3 o'clock in the morning, and I felt a desperate, irrational need to be surrounded by things that smelled like safety. I didn't have anything of my own. All my clothes were at my old apartment, and the ones Silas had bought me were new and smelled like nothing. I wandered into his master suite. It was a cavernous room, dominated by a bed that looked like it could sleep 6 people. I went to his walk-in closet. It was a temple to alpha success, rows of suits, crisp white shirts, and cashmere sweaters. I started pulling things off the hangers. I took a heavy gray sweater, a soft flannel shirt, and a silk robe. I piled them in the center of the closet floor and sat down in the middle of them. I buried my face in the gray sweater. It smelled so strongly of him, that cedar, that coffee, that deep, rich alpha scent, that I felt my entire body finally relax. I didn't hear him come in. I didn't know he was there until I heard the faint click of the closet door opening further. I froze, clutching the sweater to my chest, my heart hammering against my ribs. I looked up, expecting him to be angry, to tell me to get out, to mock me for being a stereotypical Omega. Silas was standing in the doorway. He was wearing a white t-shirt and pajama pants, and he looked tired. He didn't say a word. He didn't look at the pile of clothes I'd ruined. He just looked at me, sitting on the floor in the middle of his things, looking like a stray cat that had finally found a warm spot. His expression was something I couldn't read. It wasn't pity. It wasn't even affection. It was something older, something more primal. It was the look of a man who had finally realized that the thing he'd been chasing wasn't a goal, but a person. He walked into the closet, sat down on the floor across from me, and leaned his back against the shoe rack. "You're nesting," he said. It wasn't a question. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my face burning. "I'll put it all back. I couldn't sleep." "Leave it," he said. He reached out and picked up a stray sock, turning it over in his hand. "Everyone in my life wants something from me, Julian. My family wants the legacy. My investors want the profit. My staff wants the prestige. You're the only person who has ever treated me like a problem to be avoided." I looked at him, surprised by the honesty in his voice. "You are a problem," I said, but there was no bite in it. "You're arrogant, you're bossy, and you think you can buy your way out of every situation." "I know," he said. And yet, when I saw that photo, when I heard that heartbeat, I realized I didn't want to be a resource anymore. I wanted to be a wall. I wanted to be the thing that stood between you and the rest of the world. He looked at me then, and for the first time, I saw the vulnerability he'd been hiding behind all that marble and glass. I don't know how to do this, he said. I don't know how to be a partner. I only know how to be an alpha. I reached out, my fingers trembling, and touched the sleeve of his shirt. You're doing okay, I said. For a beginner. He let out a small, huffing laugh and reached over, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. His hand stayed there, his thumb brushing against my cheekbone. His scent deepened, becoming warm and thick, like honey. I didn't pull away. The peace didn't last, of course. It never does. The external threat arrived in the form of a man named Alistair Thorne, Silas's father. He was a man who made Silas look like a cuddly teddy bear. He arrived unannounced at the penthouse while Silas was at the restaurant. He didn't even wait for me to invite him in, he just walked past the security guard like he owned the building, which he probably did. He looked at me with a cold, clinical disgust that made my skin crawl. So, he said, pacing the length of the living room. You're the little distraction. The vegetable cook from across the street. I stood my ground, though my knees felt like they were made of water. I'm Julian. And I'm not a distraction. Alistair laughed, a sharp, unpleasant sound. You're a liability. Silas is in the middle of a multi-million-dollar expansion. He's supposed to be marrying the daughter of the Sterling estate next month. And instead, he's playing house with a pregnant Omega who can't even pay his own rent. I felt a cold knot of dread form in my stomach. Marrying. Silas hadn't mentioned a marriage. He hadn't mentioned anything about his family's expectations. I'm going to make this very simple for you, Julian, Alistair said, stopping in front of me. You will take this check. He pulled a piece of paper from his pocket and laid it on the coffee table. It was for $500,000. You will move out of this city. You will change your name. And you will never contact my son again. If you don't, I will ensure that your little restaurant is not just closed, but demolished. I will tie you up in legal battles for the next 20 years. You will lose the child, and you will lose everything else. I looked at the check. It was more money than I'd ever seen in my life. It was a way out. It was a way to have the life I wanted without the fear of being Silas's prisoner. But as I looked at it, I realized I didn't want a life without him. I didn't want a life where that heartbeat I'd heard in the clinic was just a memory. I looked up at Alistair. You can take your check and shove it, I said. My voice was steady. Surprising even myself. He's not your son. He's a man. And he's the father of this baby. Alistair's face turned a mottled purple. You little, he didn't finish the sentence. The front door slammed open, and Silas walked in. He didn't look like the man who had sat on the closet floor with me. He looked like a god of war. He walked straight over to the table, picked up the check, and tore it into a dozen pieces. Get out, he said. His voice was so low it was almost a growl. Silas, don't be a fool, Alistair said, trying to regain his composure. This is about the future of the company. This is about the Thorne name. The Thorne name is mine, Silas said, stepping between me and his father. And everything I have built is mine. If you ever speak to him again, if you ever even look toward this building, I will liquidate every asset I have in your holdings. I will burn the bridge, Alistair. And I will watch you drown. Alistair stared at him, realizing for the first time that his son wasn't bluffing. He turned on his heel and walked out, the silence he left behind ringing in my ears. Silas turned to me. He was breathing hard, his nostrils flaring. Are you okay? He asked. I nodded, though I was shaking. Yeah. I'm fine. He grabbed me then, pulling me into a hard, desperate hug. He buried his face in my neck, his scent exploding around us, cedar, ozone, and a fierce, protective heat. He's mine, he muttered into my skin. You're mine. The child is mine. I don't care about the company. I don't care about the name. I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't possession. It wasn't the takeover I'd feared. It was a choice. He was choosing me over everything else he had ever known. I reached up and wrapped my arms around his neck, holding on for dear life. I know, I said. We're yours. 2 weeks later, we were at a charity gala. It was the biggest event of the year, and everyone who was anyone in the city was there. Silas had insisted I go with him. I was wearing a suit that cost more than my entire kitchen staff's yearly salary, and I felt like an imposter. We were standing in the middle of the ballroom, under a chandelier that looked like it was made of frozen tears. A reporter approached us, a woman with a sharp smile and a microphone. "Mr. Thorne," she said. "There have been rumors about your personal life. Rumors about a certain rival chef." Silas didn't hesitate. He reached out and slid his arm around my waist, pulling me flush against his side. The scent of him was calm now, steady and sure. "These aren't rumors," he said, his voice carrying across the quieted room. "This is Julian. He is my mate. And we are expecting our first child in the spring." The room went silent. I felt 1,000 eyes on us, some shocked, some judging, some curious. I looked up at Silas. He wasn't looking at the crowd. He was looking at me. And in that moment, I realized that the wrong number hadn't been an accident at all. It had been the only right thing that had ever happened to me. The birth happened on a Tuesday in late March. It was raining, a soft, gentle spring rain that smelled like wet earth and new beginnings. I was in the kitchen of the Root, which had finally reopened after Silas's repairs turned out to be a complete top-to-bottom renovation. I was testing a new recipe for a ramp and ricotta tart when the first contraction hit. It wasn't like the movies. It wasn't a sudden explosion of pain. It was just a slow, heavy tightening, like a hand squeezing my heart. I leaned against the counter, breathing through it. I didn't panic. I just picked up my phone and called him. "Silas," I said when he picked up. "It's time." He was there in 6 minutes. I don't know how he did it. He must have broken every traffic law in the city. He bundled me into the car, his face a mask of concentrated focus. The labor was long. It was 18 hours of pain, sweat, and the kind of exhaustion that makes you forget your own name. But Silas never left. He stayed by the bed, his hand in mine, letting me squeeze his fingers until they must have been bruised. He didn't say much, but he was there. He was the wall. And then, at 4 o'clock in the morning, the same time I'd sent that fateful text months ago, the world changed. The sound of a baby's cry filled the room. It was a loud, demanding, beautiful sound. The nurse handed him to me, a small, red, wrinkled bundle of potential. I looked down at him, and I felt a laugh so sharp it physically hurt. Silas leaned over us, his eyes wet, his scent a shimmering, golden cloud of cedar and pure, unadulterated joy. "He's perfect," he whispered. He looked at me, his forehead resting against mine. "You did it, Julian. We did it." A year later, the block is the same, but different. The Root and Embers are still there, across the street from each other. The food critics still write about our rivalry, calling it the greatest conversation in the city. They don't know that the two chefs share a bed, a home, and a toddler who has a very strong opinion about mashed peas. I was sitting at a table in the Root, watching the lunch rush. Our son, Leo, was sitting in a high chair next to me, happily banging a wooden spoon against a plastic bowl. The door opened, and Silas walked in. He wasn't wearing a suit today. He was wearing a simple black t-shirt and jeans. He looked like a man who was at peace. He walked over and kissed the top of Leo's head, then leaned down and kissed me. "How's the tart?" he asked, nodding toward the plate in front of me. "It's better than yours," I said, grinning. He laughed and sat down across from me. "Keep telling yourself that, Omega." I pulled my phone out of my pocket. It was an old habit now, checking the messages. I scrolled back, way back, until I found the photo. The grainy grey lima bean. The ultrasound that had started it all. I looked at it for a long time, then looked at the man across from me and the little boy next to me. "You know," I said. "I still have your number saved as Truffle Thief." Silas raised an eyebrow. "Really? After everything?" I nodded. "Yeah. Because you did steal something. You stole my entire life." He reached across the table and took my hand, his thumb rubbing circles over my knuckles. "And I'm never giving it back," he said. I looked out the window at the street, at the two restaurants that defined this block, and I realized that the accident, the stupid, small, life-altering accident, hadn't been a mistake. It had been fate. It had been the universe's way of telling me that sometimes, the wrong number is exactly the one you were meant to call. I leaned back in my chair, listening to the sound of my restaurant, the scent of vanilla and warm bread mixing with the distant smell of wood smoke from across the street. It was a perfect harmony. A perfect, chaotic, beautiful mess. And as Silas leaned over to steal a bite of my tart, I knew that I wouldn't change a single second of it. Not the morning sickness, not the fear, and certainly not the text message that changed everything. Because in the end, we weren't just rivals anymore. We were something much better. We were a family. And that, I realized, was the best dish I'd ever had a hand in creating. The sun began to set, casting long, golden shadows across the street, illuminating the space between our two worlds. It was a space that was no longer a battlefield, but a bridge. And as Leo let out a happy shriek, reaching for his father, I knew that we were exactly where we were supposed to be. On the same street. In the same life. Forever. I looked at Silas, and he caught my eye, a knowing smirk playing on his lips. He knew what I was thinking. He always did. That was the thing about being mates, you didn't need words to explain the things that mattered. You just needed to be there. And he was. He always was. I picked up my phone one last time and changed the contact name. No more truffle thief. No more rival. I simply typed, home. And as I hit save, I felt the last of the old walls crumble away, leaving nothing but the light. It was 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't exhausted. I was exactly where I belonged. The street was busy, the city was loud, but in here, in this small, quiet space we'd built together, everything was perfect. I watched Silas laugh as Leo smeared a piece of tart across his face, and I thought about that first text. I thought about the panic, the blocking, the way I tried to run. And I realized that sometimes, the best things in life come from the mistakes we're most afraid of making. We are the architects of our own chaos, but every now and then, the chaos builds something beautiful. Like a bridge. Like a restaurant. Like a family. I reached out and squeezed Silas's hand, feeling the strength and the warmth of him. He squeezed back, his eyes soft and full of the kind of love that doesn't need a spotlight. We were okay. We were more than okay. We were home. The rhythm of the kitchen continued behind us, a steady beat of pens and voices, but for a moment, the whole world felt still. Just us. Just the three of us on this little street, making something that would last. And as the first stars began to blink into existence above the city, I knew that no matter what happened next, no matter how many critics came or how many seasons changed, we would be fine. Because we had each other. And we had the story that started with the wrong number and ended with everything. I closed my eyes for a second, savoring the scent of cedar and honey, the scent of my life. It was a good scent. It was the best scent in the world. And as I opened them again to see Silas smiling at me, I knew that I was finally, truly, ready for whatever came next. The war was over. The love had won. And the street was ours. I watched the couple walk by outside, pausing to look at the menus of both restaurants, debating where to go. They looked young, excited, and a little bit lost. I wanted to go out there and tell them that it didn't matter which door they chose. I wanted to tell them that sometimes, the best meals aren't the ones you plan for, but the ones that find you when you're not looking. But I didn't. I just stayed in my seat, holding my husband's hand and watching my son grow, knowing that my own story was exactly the one I was meant to tell. And it all started with a grain of sand, a grainy photo, and a man who refused to let me be alone. It was the most beautiful accident of my life. And I would do it all over again in a heartbeat. Every single second. Every single text. Every single mistake. Because they all led here. To this moment. To this man. To this life. And as the night finally settled over the city, I realized that the only thing better than a perfect plan is a perfect accident. And ours was the best one of all. I looked at Silas one last time before we got up to leave, and I saw the same thought reflected in his eyes. We were the lucky ones. We were the ones who found the right number in the middle of 1,000 wrong ones. And we were never going to let it go. The end of the day was just the beginning of the rest of our lives, and as we walked out the door together, the bell chiming one last time, I knew that the street would never be the same. And neither would we. We were Julian and Silas. We were the root and embers. We were a family. And we were exactly where we were meant to be. On the same street, under the same stars, sharing the same heart. It was a long way from that first terrified morning in the kitchen, but every step had been worth it. Every tear, every argument, every moment of doubt. They were all just ingredients in the masterpiece we were building. And as we walked toward our home, I felt the tiny hand of our son in mine and the strong arm of my alpha around my shoulders, and I knew that this was the only review that ever mattered. 5 stars. Perfect. Home. I looked back at the restaurants one last time, their lights glowing softly in the dark. They looked like 2 beacons, guiding us through the night. And as we turned the corner, leaving the street behind for the comfort of our penthouse, I whispered a silent thank you to the universe. Thank you for the mistake. Thank you for the wrong number. And thank you for the man who answered. Because without him, I would still be peeling carrots in the dark, wondering when my life was going to start. Now, I didn't have to wonder. My life was right here, walking beside me in the rain. And it was more beautiful than I ever could have imagined. We reached the building, the glass and steel reflecting the city lights, and as the elevator rose toward the top floor, I felt a sense of peace that I had never known before. This was it. This was the result of the accident. This was the consequence of the connection. And as the doors opened to our home, I knew that I was finally, truly, at rest. The story was told. The meal was served. And the love was just getting started. I walked into the living room, the view of the city spreading out before us like a carpet of diamonds, and I felt Silas pull me close. I love you, he whispered into my ear. I love you too, I said, leaning my head against his shoulder. And as we stood there, watching the world go by below us, I knew that we were the luckiest people in the city. Because we had found each other in the chaos. We had found the right connection in a world of wrong numbers. And we were never, ever going to let it go. The silence of the penthouse was a comfort now, a sanctuary from the noise of the world. And as we tucked Leo into bed and settled onto the sofa together, I knew that this was the only way the story could have ended. Not with a bang, but with a quiet, steady heartbeat. The same one I'd heard all those months ago. The one that had told me everything was going to be okay. And it was. It really was. I looked at Silas, his eyes soft in the dim light, and I knew that no matter what the future held, we would face it together. Because we were a team. We were a pair. We were the accidental connection that became the permanent one. And as I drifted off to sleep in his arms, I knew that I was finally, truly, home. The morning would come, and the restaurants would open, and the war would continue in its own, beautiful way. But for now, there was only this. Only us. Only the love that had grown from a single, stupid mistake. And that, I realized, was the most important lesson of all. That the things that change your life are rarely the things you plan for. They are the things that happen when you're busy making other plans. Like a wrong number. Like a rival. Like a baby. And as I felt Silas's heartbeat against my back, I knew that I wouldn't have it any other way. Not for all the truffles in the world. Not for all the 3-star reviews. Just this. Just us. Just here. On the same street. In the same life. Forever. The end was just the beginning, and I couldn't wait to see what happened next. Because with Silas by my side, I knew that every day would be a new adventure, a new recipe, a new story to tell. And I was ready. I was finally, truly ready. For everything. For us. For the future. And as the first light of dawn began to touch the city, I knew that it was going to be a beautiful day. A perfect day. A day that started with the wrong number and ended with exactly the right one. And that was all I ever needed to know. The world was big, and the world was loud, but in here, in our world, everything was just right. And as I woke up to the smell of cedar and coffee, I knew that I was the luckiest man alive. Because I had found the one thing that everyone is looking for. I had found home. And it all started with a text message that was never meant for him. But I am so glad he was the one who answered. I am so glad he was the one who stayed. And I am so glad he was the one who loved me. Because he's the only one who ever could. And that is the true story of the accidental connection. The one that wasn't an accident at all. The one that was always meant to be. And the one that I will cherish for the rest of my life. Every single day. Every single moment. Every single breath. Because he is my Alpha. And I am his Omega. And together, we are exactly what we were always meant to be. A family. On the same street. In the same heart. Forever. And ever. Amen. The city began to wake up below us, the sounds of the morning rising like a symphony, and as I looked at Silas, I knew that our story was just one of many. But to me, it was the only one that mattered. The one about the chef, the rival, and the wrong number. The one that ended with a baby and a bridge. The one that ended with us. And as we started our day, I knew that no matter what happened, we would be okay. Because we had the most important ingredient of all. We had each other. And that was more than enough. It was everything. It was the whole world. And it was ours. All ours. On this little street. In this big city. In this beautiful life. And as the sun rose higher, casting its light over everything we'd built, I knew that the best was yet to come. Much more than we ever dreamed. Much more than we ever hoped. Just us. Just here. Just now. And forever. The accidental connection was the best thing that ever happened to me. And I'm so glad I hit send. I'm so glad he was there. And I'm so glad we're here. Together. At last. The end. Or rather, the beginning. Of the rest of our lives. On the same street. With the same heart. And the same love. Forever. And always. The light hit the copper pans in the kitchen, making them shine like gold, and as I started to cook breakfast for my family, I knew that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. In the kitchen. In the light. In the love. And it was perfect. Just perfect. Like a wrong number that turns out to be exactly the right one. Like a rival who turns out to be your mate. Like a life that turns out to be more than you ever could have imagined. And that is the truth. The whole truth. And nothing but the truth. From the chef at the root. To the man I love. To the life we share. Forever. On the same street. In the same heart. With the same love. And it is beautiful. Just beautiful. The end.